Welcome to Two Bees in a Pod. I am Bilola.
And I am B. Leonga, and this is a podcast about immigrant experiences in the U.S., sharing our perspectives on various topics,
Including straddling cultures, fitting in, staying connected, learning and unlearning the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Welcome everyone to this week's episode. We are going to be doing a multi-part series on grief. We'll see how many parts it turns into, but this is the first one. And our special guest who so graciously agreed to join us today is Whitney Asaha. She's going to be talking with us about grief and sharing her own experiences with grief from an immigrant perspective, but just also a universal perspective. Our icebreaker today is the question, what was your first experience or understanding of death as a child? So do you have a memory of the first person? Maybe it was a pet. For a lot of children, it's animals that they first kind of come into contact with the concept of death. Or, do you have a memory as a child when you kind of came into that understanding, like people die?
I don't know. It's definitely not a pet. I grew up in Cameroon. Oh, I was aware. I don't know if it was my granduncle, my grandmother's brother. I remember well because he was in the hospital and he had been so sick. And we had gone to, like, my mom was taking care of him. We'll go to the hospital, and then he finally passed away after a while. So that was in primary school. That's the first person that I really remember, like, the whole process, kind of. But I don't feel like it affected me, but I understood that it's not going to be here and all that. Yeah.
Do you know how old you were? Do you remember?
No. I would say I was in primary school, maybe 8, 9.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah. And did you have this idea? I don't know whether you were raised in like a religious environment, but did you have this idea of he has gone to this place, or you were just like, okay, he's not here anymore?
Oh, they always say, I feel like I didn't even think about it. But as a Christian, you just like, oh, he's going to heaven. But yeah, I didn't really think about it like deeply, honestly.
I vividly remember the first loss. I was 5, and it was my mother's older brother. I remember somebody coming to get my mom from the house on like a Sunday, and they weren't really talking, but like the mood shifted. And then when he passed away on a Tuesday, I remember my mother coming into the house just crying, and her friend came with her and they were trying to talk to her and console her. And all I kept thinking about was the last time he visited, I was playing with VHS tapes. Let me age myself. My sister and I used to build houses and things. Like, we used them like building blocks, essentially. And he was leaving, and they said, Uncle Babila is leaving. I was like, I'll see him next time. And so when they said he died, I think the only thing that I could think about is like, well, I said I would see him next time, and there's no next time. And unfortunately, I repeated that cycle for almost 30 more years before I'm learning not to next time a lot of events in life.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're not unique in that way. It's a human thing to just expect. I mean, unless a person is like has some terminal illness, you're obviously going to assume that you'll see them, right? Again.
I try not to, especially like living here now. When I see people I don't get to see every day, especially, always function from a place of, this could be it. And my friends laugh at me for being morbid in that way, but it's happened so much so that I'm a lot more conscious than the average person, I would say.
Okay. I mean, that's good. I don't remember, to be honest, like my very first, like earliest experience. I know that I came into understanding of death at some point, and again, from the Christian perspective of like, oh, the person has gone on to a better place. I don't think that made it any easier, to be honest. I mean, it's a thing that we tell children, but I don't know that it really eases the loss if it's somebody that you actually cared about, because you understand that you're really not going to see them again.
I'm laughing because so yesterday we found out that my daughter's kindergarten teacher passed away. And she had been sick for the last 2 years, but last school year she was sick where she wasn't teaching. And so last week we had a conversation where I said, I hope she's doing better and she's able to come back to school this year. And then we found out she passed away. Now, I'm not raising my kid super religious or religious. And so when I told her, I tried to use the angle of, she's not in pain anymore. So she's resting. That's a good. And she looked at me like, but she's dead. She really looked at me like I was crazy for saying that she's resting and she's not in pain anymore. And so I guess that's on me.
I think it can be challenging with kids. So, like, I don't know. So, explain that. It's just because they will ask you, or they may have more questions, and yeah, it's just something you cannot really explain to certain.
Yeah. Well, so is this, I mean, obviously she's quite grown now. She has known of death before. Do you remember that conversation that you guys first had?
I think so. Because she's gone with me everywhere that I can think of. I think the very first one, she might have been 4 when my mom's sister passed away. Because it was like a Halloween morning. We were all getting her ready for school that day, her costume, taking pictures. And then by the end of the day, my aunt had passed. My mom was leaving for Cameroon on the same day. And so we sort of had to explain what was happening. And then we went to Cameroon and she attended the funeral. But then my grandmother died a few months later. And I was just like, I didn't want to keep exposing her. I didn't know what to say. So I just said we were going to Cameroon and we got to Cameroon. Like later that day, she's like, why didn't you tell me Granny died? I was looking for her.
Oh,
So
okay. Obviously, we've been talking about death
death.
to open the episode, and that's like a major kind of experience with grief, right? That people have when you think of grief. You often think of grieving people who have passed away, but there are different kinds of grief. And this episode is going to get really heavy, but let me lighten it up a bit. So you can grieve a lot of things, right? You can grieve a career that you've left. You can grieve a place if you have moved. You can grieve friendships. You can grieve people that are still alive. So on TikTok, there's this viral video of this lady talking about how she's giving a testimony of how her husband was cheating on her while she was pregnant, and they worked it out and he came back. So when he came back to the marriage, he told her that he needed to grieve that relationship. So I guess that's a kind of grief also, grieving your affair that has ended.
I mean, like, this is fiction, but it's also in power. Although it seems to be like one of the Mandela effect, because I think that the general community remembers the protagonist Ghost telling his wife after his girlfriend passed, like, I need to mourn. I just lost the love of my life. So, hey, you could be married and, you're grieving the love of your life. Things.
Yeah,
Listen. But when I was making the notes for this episode, I just thought of that lady saying that, and I was like, wow. And yeah, she gave him the space to grieve the end of his affair. So good for you.
Good for them.
Listen, but yeah, so grief is an emotion that people obviously deal with when they're experiencing some kind of loss, right? Again, it could be death, loss of a relationship, loss of whatever, some part of you or an experience that you've had. And it's a universal experience, which is one reason why we wanted to do this series. But as much as it's universal, I think that it expresses in different ways, right? Depending on your culture. Maybe, I don't know. And I don't know how vastly different the experiences of grief are depending on your culture. I don't know. Maybe we're more alike that way.
I think the big difference is like Western and non-Western cultures. In a lot of non-Western cultures, grieving is loud and there's a lot of emphasis on community, where in Western culture, it's very quiet and more silent. And maybe there's community, but I don't think the community is in the same way that it shows up in non-Western cultures.
Yeah,
that I would agree with. Particularly when we're talking about death, right? Because
Yes.
let's just keep the actual funeral. The funeral itself is a whole different thing. That one is very obvious. But there are other outward things, like I don't think women do it as much now in Cameroon, but women used to shave their head when they're, I think it's your dad, right? Is it normally your dad who
Your
dies?
husband,
Husband, um, parents.
parents, depending on your culture, depends
Yeah.
on your tribe, and then yeah, and then mourn also for like a year.
Yeah, you wear black
Mm-hmm.
or white.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've seen when I was in primary school, one of my friends, her dad had passed away and her mom wore blue for
For
multiple years, actually. Yeah. So that outward expression of the grief, right? That's something that I don't know. Maybe it exists in European cultures that I have not seen, but I've only kind of seen that in Cameroonian and other kind of African cultures. I don't know about Asian. I'm not really familiar with their.
I'm not really familiar. In Houston, I learned about Ghanaian like funeral, like wake keep, kind of like how they celebrate life before the funeral, where they do the wake. I always said they wore sheets because the men, you usually see the men in the parking lot with these big garbs and they just wrap it around their shoulders and their bodies with no.
I think I've seen that. Yeah, so definitely that outward, expression of grief is different. But this is the thing, we're talking again here about the death of a loved one, right? Because there are different kinds of grief that are not acknowledged in
Yes.
our culture. One that comes to my mind, well, it's acknowledged, but the loss of a child, right? Loss of a pregnancy.
Yes.
Loss of a
Yes.
pregnancy, not a child who maybe even stillbirth, but especially early.
Both, I would
That
say, loss of a pregnancy and a stillborn child. It's almost like a lack of acknowledgement, or people make, I mean, maybe the intent is not, but flippant remarks like, "Ah, if you born again now, you can have another one," and things like that, where nobody's taking into account that your grief, or like having a child after you've had a loss. And I think for the parent or the mother, you're dealing with like, okay, I'm happy for this child, but it could bring back memories of that loss, and nobody but you seems to recognize and or acknowledge it.
Yeah. And to be fair, I don't know that American society is any better.
No, I don't think so.
Honestly, I feel like a lot of them happen silently also. So it's now that you're hearing a little bit more about people even talking about like their pregnancy losses. A lot of people are not even comfortable talking about it. So yeah, I feel like it's something that a lot of people have dealt with, but they just deal with it quietly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so that's the reason why we wanted to do this series, right? Again, just to explore how we might process it differently. And we're going to start off talking about death in this episode, but other episodes we might talk about different kinds of grief. So, Bilola, you shared this article, which I had never heard of grief being like described this way, like anticipatory grief, acute, normal. That one might be above my head.
I can relate to anticipatory grief, but again, I just want everybody to be aware that I lean towards the morbid, and I have a lot of death on my brain at all times. And so there's certain things. I have friends who, if they call me back to back, I'm always worried somebody died. Like, a lot of my first reactions to everything is always thinking that somebody died, which I don't think it's normal. I'm not going to, but it just is where I am in life currently. And so that constant, it's like waiting for the shoe to drop, because if you know that somebody is dying, you're never that prepared. But I've talked to people who said they can handle death when they knew that the person was going to die, because they start grieving before the person even goes. But like the sudden, where you're talking to this person today and then in the morning they're gone, is where they struggle with. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, from that perspective, right? Especially like we said, if it's somebody who has like a terminal illness, or maybe if just a very old person whose health is in decline, you kind of are already preparing emotionally and mentally. So before we get into the different stages of grief and our experiences, Whitney, can you just, because you responded to a what would I like a call out that Bill made on Instagram, right, for people who wanted to come on the episode and talk about grief. So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and what moved you to want to join us on this particular topic?
About myself, my name is Whitney. Family style or Instagram. That's what I want to be known as. I do clothing styling, and I'm just a regular girl who likes to help girls feel confident about themselves using clothing. But the reason really why it's so funny, I've been talking or thinking about doing like a whole death series on TikTok because I feel like we don't talk about it in our communities, and because of the way death affected me. And it did not affect me the way, and my reaction during my death of my mother was not the way we are in Africa, and the way it affected me. So I wanted to talk about it and just to also talk about like preparation for your death, like around you, like stuff like that. I know it's like topics that it's so weird. Me and my mom talked about these things, and just the way it affected me and the kind of backlash I received when during that time. But yeah, I thought it would be interesting for like, especially for our African community to share that. And it's something that I've been thinking I would do on TikTok, but I've not just gotten the courage to do it yet. But yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, definitely thank you for being the first, right, to join us. So, what was your experience with the passing of your mom? How was it different than what is the norm in our culture?
Lamar. So the way I'll compare it is because I lost both of my parents as a teenager. I was younger when my dad passed, but the difference was like I was able to, once it happened, like I accepted it and I was able to cry and like process it, and you just go through the grief. You start going through the grieving process immediately. Like you're crying, you're thinking about it, you're present with it, and it's just you're having dreams, so whatever is happening. My mother's death, it destabilized me. The shock. I was in shock. I cannot explain. It was like an out of body experience. I was in shock. I wasn't eating. I was extremely bold. There's nothing during that time. Nobody could tell me nothing. You could not speak. They had family meetings about me. They were calling people about my reaction. I wasn't crying. Another thing, I wasn't crying. See, just imagine you're African and your mother has died. You're not crying. Everybody was calling me out. I was rude. It was like I was doing everything to distract myself. It doesn't mean I was not going through it. I was doing a lot of things to distract myself. And I did not even know exactly what was going on with me because that was the first time I'm experiencing that kind of thing myself. So everybody like something is wrong with me. They were like really mean remarks to me. Literally, people were like, "It looked like I'm happy that my mother has passed away," like stuff like that. So that's why I wanted to talk about it. But like the whole time, I was like, the way people see me, like I'm crazy. I don't know what's going on with me. So it took me a long time to accept or to just go through that process, and it was crazy. That's why I kind of wanted to talk about it. And yeah,
How old were you at the time?
I was 19.
Okay. And did you have siblings?
No, I don't have like biological siblings, but there were other children in the house that grew up with me that we could share. But at the same time, I knew that I was going to be the one mostly affected because even though they were there, they all had their own parents, although they grew up in our house. But it's something like you can go back to your mother now or something. But I did not have anybody to go back to, you know. But yeah.
That's a good point, right? Because we were just talking about funerals and death in our culture, and as much as it's community, there's a lot of community support, there's still kind of an expectation of how you behave. People don't do it as much anymore, but back in the day, across African cultures, people would hire mourners to come and wail and weep at a funeral because the expectation is that everybody should be having this kind of dramatic, what to talk of, not to talk of the loved ones of the person, right? They expect you to be rolling on the floor,
Right.
and being very like the theatrics is almost like it's expected, and people look at that and say, "Oh, Digeb really, she really loved her mom."
Exactly.
So to your point, where they see you kind of being stoic, and to the point of even saying that you're happy that your mother died. So that's the kind of downside of that.
Right.
You talk about hiring professional mourners. And really, I don't know if you noticed this growing up in Douala, but like on Friday in Douala is Kwedi Day, which is essentially when everybody goes to a mortuary to take out a corpse and like have their wake keeps. For one, there's traffic because Douala people don't give a single fuck about the rest of us. They're going to block the road. But more than anything, you
Yes.
see all the aunties at the mortuary with their red lipstick, right? There used to be a joke that if you
Yes.
go to a Douala wake, you see a lady, she'll cry like, then she remove her lipstick, put it back, and then continue. And on the other hand, the stereotype is that Bamileke people, like on Friday nights, they are all of them at the park going to the village because that's where it's at for the weekend. Like, matter what, they will be popping, like, again, death in Cameroon, depending on the age, right? It's also seen as a celebration of life. And so
Yes.
that's where it's popping that weekend, like, directement à l'ouest, wherever you're going to, because
Exactly.
the champagne will be flowing. The food.
And you
And
have
also
those
it
aunties who, I mean, sometimes you look at them, you're like, what's the relationship of this woman to
exactly
the deceased? Because the way she's
exactly.
crying, she has
First of all, it depends on the person's status. Like the person
That
that
part.
died, depending on your status, that also affects the kind of the crowd and the death. Because people use it as different things. Like people are coming there for different purposes. It's like I don't want a big guy who go
Ex-
dress go
yes, it's very much a social event.
yes, like the concept of that die na big die just kills
that big
me.
guy.
Like I understand it,
Yeah.
but it's also like, so which one a small die?
That's
Like
more than exactly. More than I want with money no dey
They-
plenty.
So we have heard of the 5 stages of grief. I don't know if this is a universal thing because I've never sat down to say, like, okay, I went through each one of these stages, right? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I don't know how, maybe it expresses differently, but I don't know that everybody goes through um, those stages.
I feel like you feel different, not in the same. I think you go through some parts of it, but you don't go it through it. You don't necessarily go through it in that order,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it just depends on how the death. Like I always say, and it is for me. Every death affected me in a different way. The way you accept it. So it just goes, and the thing is that you don't get to choose how it affects you. It's literally a different feeling every single day. So you may do like it may be acceptance before or denial. Like it may go before and then it comes back. It's very weird. It's very weird.
and that also ties into, when people always say you get your grief gets better with time, or something about time heals grief, or
Yes, time to.
and I had to like tell people that nah, time doesn't do anything for grief, which is why I had that illustration. Like grief is like this big thing sitting there, and the more you live, it's like you add more memories and you add more life over your grief. So you have more space from you and your grief, but you always carry it with you, and you never know when it's going to shake up and come back. But time does not necessarily do it, doesn't heal the grief, and the grief doesn't go away. You carry it with you for the rest of your life,
Yeah.
essentially.
I mean, that's a good way of putting it because I've never thought about it that way per se. Because I just like, I mean, it gets better in the way like you feel, not, I don't want to say feel about it, but you're not dealing with it again as much every day, as heavy as when it happens. However, like you said, it shows up in differently at different stages in your life. It shows up differently. Yeah, yeah. Oh, that me die with me again today. It just shows up. It sneaks up. That's a very true statement. It sneaks up on you in different ways. You do something and like it comes right back as you. So that is a good way to think about it.
So, with your own experience, right, Winnie, was it just kind of time that transformed and you got, like you said, you were very angry, combative, and all of these other expressions that
Mhm.
people were not used to seeing? Was it just time that kind of changed your response, or was
Yeah,
there a moment or an experience that you went through that shifted how you were going through the
there
grief?
was. I would say time. It was just time, and then there was a moment that something happened, but I feel like I have to explain like you see the transition because although doing the I mean, when it happened, I would say shock. I cried a little bit like the day it happened, but for some reason I started calculating everything that I feel like that's why like what are we doing moving forward? Because my mom was like, she's like the tree of our family, like the anchor for nearly everybody. So it's like, it was a big shock to all of us. So I was so angry, and all of these things are happening with time. And like, I did not know what I was saying, but I have an auntie. Billy knows that auntie. She was the only person who she's the only one who stood up for me. And she'll be like, people should leave Whitney alone in her own time. She'll cry. And I'll be like, oh, thank God she's saying something, because even me, I don't know when the time is going to come. So, but one thing, the whole thing about that I really wanted to cry. I really wished I could cry, but I could not. It was so, I felt like it was a stone sitting on my chest every single time, and I was not sleeping. So it was a bad thing. Then during the funeral, the actual funeral, the first time I burst out crying when I saw my mother's corpse. And another thing, I'm scared of cops, so it doesn't matter how much I love you. It's not my cup of tea. So even every time they tried to have me go and see her, I said no, no. But I was shaking. I was literally like about to like faint when I was about to see her. But that was the first time I cried. And I think I cried then, and then I cried again like when they were about to the girls come and say our last words before they're about to close the coffin. Then they are going to bury her. I cried again then. But after that I continued the story, whatever continued. And then one day, but I was still acting out, going out. I was going out a lot, just whatever. And then my auntie one of my aunties, she kept on saying that she was the first person. She said I should get that's the first time I heard about therapy. She was like, she thinks that she needs to find somebody to therapy because they don't understand what's going on with me. Like, I wasn't doing anything to anybody per se, but if you just said anything that did not work in my head, I'll just answer you. I don't care whether you're my mother, my grandmother, you're getting it. Yeah. And I did not care. I did not care. So she was the one who like kind of walked me through everything that I was going. Like, if I'm going through something, I'll be so angry, and she'll like bring me back. And then one day, a few months later, like we've gone. I feel like, to me, grief really starts when the burial is over. That is, to me, when everybody has retired to their house, you're now trying to figure out your new life without this person. That is where the real thing happens. Where your whole, in my case, my whole routine has changed. I'm not living in the house that I was living anymore. I'm living with somebody else. They have their own rules in the way, because you're still a child under somebody, and they're telling you all these things. In my head, I'm like, who are you to tell me this thing? You're not my mother. So things like that. But one day, I just said, a few months later, she kept on telling me that the grief is going to come. One day I'll break down. That's the hope, that you break down one day. And it just happened one day. I started school at this point. This was like 2 months later. And I just started crying. It started like in the morning, and I cried for like 7 hours straight there. I just started crying. I was crying. There was nothing that really prompted it. I just started crying. So I called my aunt. I was like, she came in. She was like, she called me with my middle name. She said, Gocha, hey, you finally cried, though. She left her office. It was such a beautiful moment, sad and beautiful. But she left her office and she came and sat with me. I'll never forget, for like 2 hours. And she prayed with me, and she was like, thank God. She's like, I've been waiting for this day. I'm waiting for you to. But she's like, I've been waiting, this child, I've been waiting. I thought it was like I was a walking time bomb. So she was like, she's been waiting for me to break down, to finally cry and just like release everything. But that was the day. I always said that is the day my grief started. I started dealing with it. I started like a little bit of acceptance. It was from that day that I feel like I could even breathe. And then it just continued. Yeah.
You made a very good point about the grief starting after the funeral, right? Because when the person passes away, you have to go into planning mode, ready or not. You have to go into planning mode. You're thinking about all these things. Do people have to travel? All of this. And then from when the person passes away till that funeral, you're getting, and this is in Cameroon, right? You're getting visitors every day, in and out of the house. Your house is not a house anymore. And that's a beautiful thing about community, right? Like, people are bringing food, people are just, but you don't have, listen, I ate very good food after my dad passed away. I'm going to be very honest. Listen.
But we've talked here about me and my love for die house corn and granola. So
yeah, it's really, that part is an experience, right? Like, we don't do it anymore, but for years, like after my dad died, like in our family group chat, somebody would just wake up one day, Remember that cabbage that our mom made? So some lady made some. I swear to God, some lady made some cabbage. If my sisters are listening to this, they know exactly the cabbage I'm talking about. I mean, spectacular. Anyway, like people are bringing food, people are coming to condole with you, the planning of the funeral, like the wake, all of this, and then, like you said, Whitney, when all of that is done, everybody has left. In cases where you traveled, you have to go back to your regular life. I remember I had just started, I was starting a new job like when I got back. So it's like, okay, now you have to, it's back to reality. You have to go back to life. In your case, you moved to a new house. So all of those things, like that's when, it's the reality kind of sinks in and then you're kind of looking around like, but the world is, everybody's
The world has
back
moved
to
on.
normal. That's the shocking part. That part,
That is the shocking part.
it shocks you, right?
Me.
Yeah.
The world has moved on. You're sitting there like the world as you know, like it just got dragged out from under your feet. You're trying to figure out what's your center, what's your north, south. And everybody says la di da, it's vacation time.
Don't
It's
ever make the mistake of going to social media because you'll just be like, people are just posting. Like, what is happening?
I'm actually happy mine happened before social media was popular because I just feel like I would have lost my mind. I swear. But it like I don't know, but it bothered me really so much instead that I was like, everybody has forgotten, like we're just gonna move on.
Yep.
And then let me tell you one thing about, I don't know if it's about grief, but during that I really say you really find your people. You really know who is for you and who is not for you. And like, so a lot of people that you think that will be there for you, maybe after, maybe check on you, or you will know that a lot of people are just hanging around your family. They just disappear. Till today, I'm telling you, it just went away. So I feel like it's part of the group because you think that I grew up in a house where like there's just so many people all the time, and then all of a sudden there's nobody. You're like, what? Oh my god! But like, yeah, a lot of people just disappeared. A lot of people that were close family friends, they just disappeared.
I have to add, I grew up with Whitney, and her mom worked for a company that they had Christmas parties every year. And like they also had picnics during the year for children of employees, right? And as she said, she was an only, like her mom had her, but her mom also had other children at home. And her mom would insist on gathering like 20 of us to take to this party. We'd have one car. I cannot think of, I have one child. So take this one child that I can control to go have fun. I will voluntarily wake up and be like, hey guys, I'm taking your kids out on Saturday. Just get them ready for me. She'll start in Bonaberry, like the neighborhood where we live, put all of us overloading her car. Sometimes she had to do 2 trips. Then sometimes she'll take them all the way to where the party was, or she'll like have a halfway point where she'll take from Bonaberry, drop off here, go back, bring some, and then take us in shifts. And like I said, she took at a minimum 10 of us for no reason. To me, looking back at it, it is the most selfless thing. And so for Whitney to say like people did not show up as a child, when I was younger, I can recognize like she showed up for all her friends because she did not have to do that. It was a choice because she'll get there I feel like it was because of her that they started counting people's children even.
I know. You remember these details, what I mean?
Because I think about it a lot that listen, I have one and me, there's a few kids I would take out. But to go and be carrying us the way that she was carrying us, like she did not, her car was not big enough, but she would still be driving no, she could have put us in a taxi even, and she did not do that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So on that note, right, Whitney, so how did, not specifically just your mother's death, but this grief and any other grief in general, how did it change your relationship with the people around you, right? Like, so did you get stronger relationships with people who maybe you're not as close to, or did you lose relationships that you thought were stronger than they actually were?
Both. I would say both. We lost a lot of relationship with a bunch of people. I mean, like it happens. I say it happens organically
It does.
because it does. You just wake up and they're not there, and like life has moved on. So it's like, what are you gonna do as the person? Why the person is not, So it just happened. They just fell off. A lot of people just fell off, and just me myself, I just stopped talking to a lot of people because a lot of things just happened during that time, and I was just like, I'm trying to avoid like just getting into trouble and just talk. I don't know. I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to be with peace because I was so much of a topic of discussion among people so much that I was like, okay, I'm going to disappear so that it should not be an issue. Because my grandmother was, yeah. Anyway, but yes. And then it made my relationship with a few people, like a lot of people who you don't know expect. I will say this, show up for you also. People that you don't expect to show up for you will come out of the blues. I mean, I still had to certain level. I always say that I always say I was a lucky orphan, or so that's what I always say because I had my grandparents who really, really took care of me. But like a lot of people that we did not expect, some neighbors, just random people, really, really showed up, and then my relationships also felt built from there. I also became really, really closer to my dad's family at the time because I grew up with my mom. I'm predominantly on my mom's side. So I also became like closer to my dad's cousins, my dad's cousins, like, oh, my cousins, sorry, on my dad's side really started showing up more for me as well during that time. And we have grown so much. We're way closer right now too. So yeah, you lose some, but you gain a lot of people also. Like just random people even come to America. Because I came to America like I want to say like a year and a half after my mom passed away. Like new friends or just yeah, most of my close friends now are not people that I even grew up with. So yeah,
Mm.
you build new relationships and yeah, you just find out you people are
So,
not on the same page.
and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Bilala had talked about like how grief has made her kind of be more aware, right? To, I would say, value the time that you have with people. So have you found that grief has changed the way you approach friendships or other relationships, like to kind of treasure people while they're with you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm very, very intentional with my people. Extremely too intentional. Because I'm like, I really think about it. I'm like, people don't think about it. I'm like, that's the surest thing that happens. You never know. Like, we've had that the death, but other people have died. And especially now, I feel like I'm even more aware because a lot of my friends or people around us are dying too. So it made me very much more intentional with the people that I have because I'm like, anything can happen at any time. Literally, I'm also extreme in the way I think about not like if I'm going to see you the last time, but like let's say if I have an issue with a friend, literally take it to the extreme or somebody extreme where I have to think about that if you are going to die, how is it going to affect me? That is how I dis
I relate to
yes.
that very heavily. Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, I'm happy I'm not another one because I thought I was so like,
Yes.
hey,
No,
these guys
I
are
relate to that
extremists.
because
No.
I've recently
I
like made decisions to like end friendships or kind of step back. And that's one thing that I
Mhm.
thought, like, if this person passed away, like, will I really feel guilty about this decision that I,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? Yeah.
I think about that and I think about like, will I feel bad about the decision? How will I, well, that makes me think if I want to be like, try to reconcile or if it's just, okay, I'm okay with this, I'm at peace with it. But yeah, that's the way I look at it. And I don't know, I feel like I have a lot of fear too. It came for me, the death came with, it has happened more like in the last couple of years. I have a lot of fear with doing a lot of things, certain things. I don't know. Grief.
You have
Yeah.
fear like
This.
you'll get into an accident or that kind of thing? Or...
No, no. I have fear that I would die early. I don't know because a
Mm.
lot of in my family died early. But it's the fear has come so much to a certain level where it's affecting me personally with everything, with like a lot of things that I would typically even my personality. I'm typically rambunctious and I've as much as I do, I'm way more quiet than I typically I can be. But I think it's from the fear because I'm identifying it and it all stems from like losing my parent, my mom, because I just feel like it takes away it just took away something. Yeah. And you're more I got so much. I'm so anxious even with like it affects my older cousin always says it affects the way I look at money. Literally. It's so weird. Yes. I'm so anxious with like I have to save. I have to do this just in case something happens, Like let yes. But she's like it literally has entered into that kind of into that. Yeah.
That's interesting. I didn't think about how it would affect like your relationship with money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you think about, like, for me, it was like, oh, when my mom was there, there's somebody to take care of you. And then there's nobody to take care of you all of a sudden. And then you come to America, you're like, oh, you have to figure out things by yourself. I came also as an international student. I think that's where all of those things came from. You're struggling and you need money. There's nowhere to go to. Oh, Jesus. So all of those things, like, they reinforce already what you're doing. So there's no way to just find money. So, like, so okay, whatever I have now, I don't want to spend. I mean, I want to spend, but I don't want to spend too much. Let's just, because in case something happens, whether it happens, just in case, like, sometimes I would like deprive myself for certain things just because in case something happens. My cousin will just be like, you have to let go a little bit. I'm trying.
That's interesting because I feel like my own approach has been, we're all going to die, so I might as well, take that trip.
I
When I
lean towards that too.
when I was
Right.
coming back from burying my aunts in 2018 or so, and Air France was like, upgrade your seats. I said, this is my aunt who has died. I didn't even know if she ever upgraded her seat.
Period.
That was I was like, okay.
Funny.
I paid for the upgrade and I sat there, it was a good little time.
I
So
know.
that is the one where I'm just like, but then again, I'm also the Lulu. I will make a lot of but I think about it because I think about my friend passed away a few years ago and she had gone on vacation. And I'm like, I'm so glad she took that trip. Imagine if she didn't go because she was saving money for a future that she did not get to see. So I'm just like, it's good to save because I said you don't want to use all the money and then you're 80 and you realize like you still have life ahead of you. But at the same time, I think that it is worth enjoying while you're here. Like, wear that dress. If you have a dress, though, you're not saving it for this event or that. Like, you just be going to a grocery store and decide to wear the dress. Or, treat yourself to brunch. You don't need anybody to do. But just, live life, right? Like Alexa said, are you adding life to your years or years to your life?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. I mean, to a certain level, I'm like that, but at the same time, I will enjoy my have my moments. Like, I will enjoy myself, but I'm trying to be more intentional
She's not.
about, like, enjoying myself, traveling and stuff like. Because I'm like, Lord Jesus Christ. But yeah, but we have a saying that we say. I mean, it's said in Cameroon, like, the one way you chop am, na your own. So whatever enters your stomach, if you die now, that's that. I mean, that's what you're gonna go. We say a lot in our family, just so that you can eat. You say, when you watch it, you say, "I better told him I smoke or kill." Before you want die, then you were like, you try for lose weight.
See, I think about that too sometimes. I'm like, man, it's true. Over here counting calories.
You come to Canada and then somebody has died. We do it in our family so much. And they'll be like, I remember chop before something can happen, then you not be chop. Then you be there, you don't lose on two sides. So I'm trying to be like more like have the balance also to like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm finding my balance now on like explore and then also like yeah, think about tomorrow.
Yeah, it's really a balance. So another thing I wanted to talk about, and maybe this wouldn't necessarily apply with your mom, but I maybe grief that you experience as an older person, right? Does it change the memories or does it impact the way you perceive like your relationship with that person, right? Because I see it sometimes, when somebody dies, right, you read their obituary or you listen to eulogies at people's funeral, and some people who were not the nicest people, you'll never go to the funeral or read the obituary and hear somebody bashing them and saying, oh, this was a very wicked man, he did not care about us. There's always, it's kind of this romanticized version of the person's life. So on an individual level, like, how does grief change the way that you see, like, for example, we're talking about friends. If you have a friend that passes away, God forbid, if you have a friend that passes away today, like, how would that grief change the way that you see the experiences that you had with the person? Would it lead to guilt, like, oh man, I should not have said this thing? Or does it kind of make you romanticize? Villa is making one face. She's like, absolutely not.
Exactly. I was about to say. I feel like for me is I've come to before, especially in Cameroon. I feel like I used to romanticize it a lot. But as I'm growing up, with my parents and with other, I say even with friends, with other people. I mean, I feel like it's different. If it's your family member or it's your friend, this is why I say that. But like my mom, I used to romanticize, but I used to have difficulties with my mom. I know these things, but I like with more stories that I've heard about my mother now that I'm growing up, it changes. It brings a lot of things into perspective with my dad, especially because I know grow up with my dad. It's bringing it up, and I get angry with God sometimes, and I said I wish my dad was here so because I have a lot of questions for him in asking in that sense. Now it doesn't really for me, not at this point because I really think I'm possessed things. It doesn't change. I don't romanticize it that much. If you were somebody, I'll just be like, I feel bad. I'm able to empathize that way if somebody has lost their family member, if it's not my family member. But if you were just a bad person, that's what you were. It's a too bad, so sad story. However, I can empathize for your brother. It's always I mean, it's a sad thing to lose, but it doesn't change. I'll just be
Yeah, and all of us are the villain in somebody's story, you know.
I know that's
exactly,
right.
exactly,
If I die today, I
exactly.
know there are gonna be some people
Somebody,
talking about good
Listen,
riddance.
somebody bullied me in Form 3. My classmate bullied the crap out of me in Form 3. I'll never forget the day I found out she died. My immediate reaction was, thank God. I'm sorry, but
Damn, below that. But she was a child now when she was
it was
bullying you.
it was reflex. It was reflex. Think about me. Think about me and how I felt. It was a relief to know that I would never run into her again ever in this life. Like I would never have to interact with her. And so, like when I say people are always like, but I'm like, listen, it wasn't it, just think about it that somebody has done something to you over and over, and then you hear that they're gone. You feel the relief. You didn't even know you were carrying this much fear or
Mm-hmm.
anxiety about them. And so now, as an adult, especially in 2024, Kendrick Lamar has taught me to stand on business. I don't care if you die, you die. We are keeping the same energy that we had.
period.
Period.
We are keeping the same energy. So yeah, we're not romanticizing. Like at best I'll offer you silence. Like, okay, he died.
Mm.
Okay. That's the response. They died. But I'm let y'all grieve. And then maybe when y'all are done, I'll remind y'all how evil this person was. And I think it's very valid. Like I know somebody who passed away who was a family member, but they were estranged. And another family member who was named after this family member that died, a deceased person. All they kept saying that day while we were sitting there was like, he was a very wicked man. And they said, wasn't that? It said, that's your namesake. And all they said was he was a very wicked man. You should let's not be looking through rose tinted glasses. Like just
Mm-hmm.
because the person is there doesn't take away all the harm and evil that they've left behind. Because these people, it's like they've gone to die, they're at peace. The chaos that they sowed and left behind is still here for the living to
Listen.
handle.
Exactly, exactly, exactly.
Oh, that's so funny. But when it comes to our parents, right, Whitney made a really good point is that I think whether or not your parents pass away, a part of growing up is really acknowledging that your parents are humans. And because as children, a lot of us, maybe not everybody, we already romanticize our parents, right? They're these people who they always make the right decisions, whatever, whatever. So part of growing up is kind of understanding, especially when you kind of get to the age that your parents were when they had you as a child when they were raising you, you're like, damn, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So clearly, I don't know if they did either. They were kind of just
Exactly.
figuring that shit out, right? So you have this humanized view now of your parents, and then I think that helps with grieving because then you're like, yeah, did they make some decisions that impacted me negatively? Sure. But at the end of the day, they were people just like me. Like I'm screwing up every day. So obviously they were, they didn't have it figured out. I still feel like they had, I don't know. I feel like when I look at myself and my peers, I'm like, there's no way our parents were just like being this dumb and goofy and like, ain't no way. They were building houses by the time they were 30.
They
Listen,
were serious adults. Serious
Listen,
adults.
a few years ago, my friends and I went to a wedding and we're doing all sorts. without saying too much, we went to a wedding in California, and you know what California is known for. And so after everybody had indulged and, it was affecting people in different ways, I just said this cannot be the same adulthood our parents were doing at this age.
It couldn't
Because
be.
look
It
at
could
what you
not
people
be.
like look at us. Look at what we're doing. Our parents were building houses, taking care of their multiple children, and extended family members.
Family.
Bruh, I can barely take care of me.
But
I
ain't no
don't
way.
we don't have pets, and I told my child that as it is, it's taking everything from me to keep you alive. You want to add a dog? How? Like, let's be for real here. And then they had multiple children. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I feel like the version of life it was they were playing a different.
They were doing adulthood pro max. We are doing the SE version
I'm
because
telling you.
or flip phone, to be honest.
See, because ain't no way. Okay,
Ain't no
so
way.
how we already talked about this a little bit, but has losing loved ones changed your own approach to life in terms of like YOLO?
I mean, to me, like, I have two thoughts about it. I'm like, if one of my family members look at this and they'll be like, I feel like I have just me, right? I feel like it's just me. I do have family members, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
And I know that it's just me and I got myself. And so the way I make my decisions, the way I live is like, I do a lot of times. You can become very hyper independent because of that, because you just know that there's not going to be support. Even like, I feel like to a certain level with like having relationship, children, different, because it's like you don't have that support. And so why should I? Some things are just like, why should I even do it? Because it's like, what am I going to like? I don't know what am I going to share it with. I don't even have like, because I don't know now. Now that I'm older, I think of how so much my mother would have helped me now, or just conversations. I don't care, especially with my career. I feel like she would have helped me so much with my career and stuff like that because she's good at stuff like that. And I'm like, she's not here, stuff like that. So it just impacts those, I don't know, those kind of, I don't know, those kind of relationships for me. I just look a lot on like, I don't count on anybody like that. if if somebody shows up now more, I'm like, okay. But subconsciously, the thing is that although you're doing it subconsciously, you get disappointed at the same time. If somebody like people don't show up for you or stuff, yes, subconsciously, although you're doing, but it still really, really hurts. And I think that's when the grief comes again. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my mommy for come now, my mommy for, for call me at this kind of time, you like you want to call him. I remember when I graduated from college, the first person my mother had died 5 years, maybe 6 years by the time I graduated, 5 and a half years. It's so funny. The first person I dialed on my phone was her number. And I was in America, yes. And it took me a while. Grief is very weird. It took me a while to realize that she's not even here for me to share that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I called her, I called my grandma. My grandma told her just passed away like a year before that. I'm like, yeah, I'm calling people who are dead, but no. But those are my people. So I'm like, and then I started crying again. So one of the times that I cried again until that day I see the death just happened. Yeah, but things like that, just yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a part of grief that we did not talk about, right? Like grieving the achievements, accomplishments, or maybe just things in your life that you wish that person was there. Like when I bought my first house, I was like, damn, like my dad didn't live to see, like to come to my house, So like those kind of
Right.
things, you're like that's a part of grief that will be there until you yourself die, right? Because you're like,
Exactly.
even when you have children, with your children's own events, you're like, man, I wish this person was here, or anything in your life. So yeah, that's one way that grief will always stay with you regardless.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about guilt, and I just want to touch on it really quickly before we go, because we talked about how the grief kind of changes, right? You just learn to live with it. It's not that it really gets smaller. It's just that your life is lifing and you're processing different ways. But there's a time, I don't know if you guys experience it, but you can feel guilty because you're like, man, I did not cry today. well, in your case, it was different, but like when you've been like crying every day since somebody has passed away, and then you're like, man, I not cried today. Like, does that mean I don't miss the person? You know what I mean? So there's feelings of guilt when you're transitioning through the different types of grief where you feel like, am I forgetting this person? And then you feel guilty about that. I don't know if you guys have like had that experience.
I mean, for me, it will definitely be like when my mom, like I just said, when I was being stoic and all of that, I felt guilty the whole time because I'm like, I'm supposed to be crying. I'm supposed to be, I don't know, you're supposed to be mourning, all of this thing. And I was not doing any of it. Like, I had no interest. Like, it was really bad. I had no interest in doing all of it. I wanted to be left alone. I hated when people come and just throw themselves. I will shift. Like, why are you doing that? It was bad. Why you to me? I was like, why you crying past me?
No, but
I
that thing
felt
is annoying too, though. That thing
very
is annoying. When people
annoying.
are really doing
What
the
is
most,
this?
you're like, come on.
They're rolling, and I'm like, and I'm just watching. Like, why are you doing this?
Have you
I'm like,
ever
come on,
had to
mommy, I'm just
console? You are the bereaved person. Somebody is
yeah,
crying. I have to console them. I want to fight when I
Billa.
see that. I literally want
Oh
to go and
my
physically remove this
days.
person. Like, leave them alone.
Oh my god, that was my life every single day. And since I was not, the people were like, "What's wrong with the bikini? What's wrong with the bikini?" And since all of those things, I feel like it started affecting me subconsciously, but I did not know. But that was the guilt was bad. I was like, then the only person I used to feel empathy to a certain level, I used to live with my grandmother. She'll be like, "What's wrong with you?" And she'll cry, although she just the way she'll speak to me, it will get to me, and I just look at her like. And that's when I used to really feel bad. I'll be like, "Where, mama? I don't know." Like, I don't know. But yeah, I think that's guilt. Also, like, and I think another thing that guilt happens is like, have I done everything that I'm supposed to do? Have it like, for example, your parents raised you, right? Now they've left. The also guilt is like, have you done things to make them proud? Have
Mm-hmm.
you left a good legacy or have you carried on their legacy? Somebody like me, people used to compare me a lot to my mother. Say, people should not compare me. Oh, please. Please. I don't know if I'm going to be able to live up to her. Things like that.
You have a child in this house to
Yeah.
come and take to a party.
Absolutely.
Follow your footsteps, Lord.
Telling a lot of that used to happen a lot, especially earlier on. I was like, "Ooh, Whitney, you have big shoes to be like." I'm like, my mind is a certain level, but in a lot of ways, I'm not. And I was just fighting battles with that. Like, okay, have you done
Yeah.
a good job? Yeah.
That's
Are
a
you
real
like,
thing. And we
yeah?
just
Have
talked
you
about it,
keeping
right?
Yeah.
their legacy? Are you keeping it up?
How
So
we feel
yeah.
like our parents were doing a lot more.
Yeah.
That I went through that experience, right? Because when my dad passed away, like you had, obviously they put together like his biography and people are telling stories and you see all these things that they accomplished. And you're looking at the age that he was. I'm like, this man was opening hospitals at the before 30, and then you're just there looking at yourself like, but what have I done? Like
Exactly.
I'm a loser. Like that was part of the experience, feeling like, man, I'm really a loser. Like my parents were doing so much by my age. They had children, they had built a house. Like, what am I doing here? So that's part of the experience, feeling very, what's the word? Like an underachiever?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So that's a good point. Okay. Before, I guess, closing thoughts, what is something that you would want to see change in Cameroonian culture about how we talk about or approach death and grief related to death?
Okay. I'm going to start with death first before I enter the grief. I have an unpopular opinion about death. I feel like we spend so much money on death, especially if the person has family. If the person has a lot family, I feel like more of the money should go to the family than the death, because I'm such a big believer of like you said, grief starts, real life starts after the person that go. If it's the family has been destabilized, if they have children, I feel like all that money, most of the money should go on to those children, because people go and bury, spend all that money, do this, do that, and then the children they don't literally think about it. They cannot go to school again, or they are struggling with this family member. It really bothers me, stuff like that. So that's my unpopular opinion, that we spend so much money on death, we focus so much on death, we romanticize it, as you said, so much that, oh, the person did one,
Big
and you
die.
focus, and then big die, big die. But we don't forget, say that person don't die, the person get picking there, get
Mm-hmm.
woman. How are they going to go after that? Or they have sisters and brothers. I prefer that I even started doing something like when somebody has died now. Sometimes I don't give them money when the die happen. When they come back from the death, when I give them money.
Hmm.
I support them. I started doing that too. Because then you'll be surprised at how much it helps them after. There's so much that happens after death that people don't like. Everybody has gone and nobody's thinking about. But I also like to also let like you know that there are different phases of death, of grief. Just like everybody's not gonna cry. Like I did not know that my dad's own I cried a river. My mom's own I did not cry at first. I started crying after, but it's like that they should allow people to go through the grief process. Allow people to go through whether it's down. I mean, we should be educated. I think it's just lack of education, honestly. That's basically it. Because it's not one way for somebody to grieve. People are going through things. There should be a lot of grace given, and people should just be loved on. And also expect that grief is going to affect you in different ways as you go. It just doesn't end. As you grow up, it's going to show up in different ways. Sometimes it really, really hits on people that their life just never ever move on. And then so we have to be really like I feel like think about stuff like that.
You made a really good point about the money part, right? A funeral is such like again, we said it's a festivity in a way. There's so much money that's spent, and it's fine if the money is there and there's still money
Right.
to support after the fact. But a lot of times that's not the case. I always think about we had a neighbor growing up, and an older lady, we called her grandma, and she had been sick for a while. And my mom made a comment after she died, was like, when this woman was sick, you did not see relatives coming to help her, give
Exactly.
her money, pay her hospital bills. When she died, the compound was full,
Exactly.
and those relatives came from the village with money to throw a funeral, host a funeral. So
Exactly.
why not show up for the person before, and to your point, show up for the family after, when they really need that money to live? The funeral is just a few days, but there's life that has to happen after that, and that in a way is much more important. Bilola, anything
Yeah.
to add?
There's so many things I don't because I keep trying to stay focused that we're talking about grief because I really wanted to ask Whitney about like handling her mother's estate, especially you were 19 and you said your mom and yourself talked about like death and
Oh
like
yes.
Mm.
Oh my God. I had help. I was going to say because a lot of parents do not. I was going to say the good thing my mother did. My mother kind of planned for her life, and she planned things. And before the death happened, she had kind of informed me like, "Oh, I have like insurance here. The house is in this like it was in her name, and all of that." But it is very, very challenging in Cameroon to follow up things. It's possible because I did it, but I needed. I was 19, so I'm underaged in Cameroon. I think you have to be 21 to follow other things. But however, I did follow up things for her estate. Literally till now, certain things I literally just changed like the name of the house, like last year. Then I changed it to my name last year or the year before. It's a whole process. It's a mess. However, like insurance in Cameroon, you can actually have insurance and take it. People don't know that they like those who have social security. They you can follow it up. It takes a long time. It literally, I was going to court all the time. People did not know that we went to court. Me and my grandparents. It was me and my grandparents going to court, following up. We had some uncles that helped us. It took us like a year and a half, but we were able to get some money from all of these things, and that's what helped me like go to school too. So yeah, that's what I would say. It took me after a while. I did not know like my mother planned, but a lot of times that we don't play. Cameroon has this thing like for the house in Douala, like it was still in my mother's name, and I had to change. To change that, you have to have like a living will. If you don't have a living will, then you have to prove that you're the chop chair and stuff like that. I had to do all of those things. I hired a lawyer who helped me with it to prove that I'm my mother's child because she did not have, or for some, I don't know, the will disappeared or something to prove that I'm my mother's child. And then, so I had to I had a lawyer who helped me do it. And the good thing about those kind of things, like changing your name of the house, it can be done anywhere in Cameroon. So, but like to actually follow up like my specific house things and like title and stuff like that, you have to do it specific in their region, like in Douala, and it's been hell. I've done most of it, but I'm not complete. Up to this day, it's a lot of money. So
Damn.
So yeah, I spent so much money. I went back to Cameroon just because of it. I follow up until they just keep asking you for money, asking you for money, asking you for money. Yeah, but I'm not like I needed a lot of help. It's possible, but a lot of people give up. That's the thing. A lot of people give up, but a lot of people don't even have the education that they can have, like insurance and stuff like that in Cameroon. But it's possible. It's possible. So yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Whitney, for joining us. This time flew by. I feel like we've only been
I
talking
know.
for 5 minutes. I hope that the listeners, the viewers enjoyed this conversation. We want to hear your comments. We want to hear, we talked about death, but other types of grief that people are interested in discussing. Definitely send us a DM on Instagram. We are at 2bspod, and then subscribe to our YouTube at 2Bs in a Pod. Whitney, please can you repeat your Instagram for the girlies who want to be stylish?
Fi Bamista. It's, let me spell it, FILL 3. Well, the 3 is like an E. Bami BAMI in style on Instagram and everywhere.
Awesome.
TikTok.
We'll tag Whitney
Okay.
when we do our post on this episode. If you guys have been reading with us, our August book of the month is Butter Honey Pig Bread by Francesca Ekuyasi. So pick up a copy and read along with us for August. Until next time.
Man no the carry water for baskets. Whitney, I'll let you. Literal translation: a man doesn't carry water in a basket. Whitney, I'll let you translate or like interpret.
Interpret. Oh, money go. Oh, because the water is gonna come out now. Literally.
So
Okay,
what's the
I know what the lesson is. I'm trying to think about how I explain it. Like, I guess carry water for pot waiting up people. that doesn't have holes.
Bill,
I
that
can't
was your
understand it, but I don't know.
interpretation.
It's not the interpretation, please.
Man no the carry water. Like I understand, but I don't know how to explain.
Explain
I,
it, yes.
I want to say kind of like my principal got mad once in high school and said some of you your heads are like soap dish, right? It's the same concept. Nothing. It's just everything.
Not
It's
a
not
soap dish.
It's not. I mean, I was being kind. He said it with a bouncer accent, so we were confused. Cause he said your heads are like
That
soup.
makes it worse.
He said like your heads are like soup dish.
Wow.
That makes it worse.
I mean, it doesn't make sense, right? Like, there's no point. Like, you cannot carry water in a basket.
Yeah.
That's
I feel like it's like don't try to do something that you don't have the right tools to do or the right
True.
skill. Because how you carry water for basket? Like you need a pot. Like go and get yourself the right skills or tools to do what it is that you're trying to do.
I feel like
Yeah.
I want to update this to say man no fit carry water for Kenja. You know what the Kenja is, right?
What's
I
it?
know. But the thing is that
I think they put
no.
they think they put chickens in the raft. It's like a weave.
Yeah.
So we basket.
Yeah, it's true. Like I'm struggling.
The way I'm thinking about it is like, it's almost like, I mean, if you're making decisions and think about things that you do thoroughly, because if not, you'll get consequences now. Almost. It's almost
Okay.
it's almost like you sow a seed, or the bed that you prepare you lie on. If you go put out water, all thing will come out. Right? You will come out. That a seed that you don't deserve will go put out ground when you
Right,
go.
like you're gonna lose. You're
gonna lose everything. Yeah, and you kind of should know. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking about it. I'm just like, all the water is gonna sip through and you're gonna have nothing.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we'll ask the listeners to send their own interpretation.
Okay. And Whitney, one last thing for you. Before we go, if you could tell us why people should listen to this episode.
Today we talked about grief and grief in the African community, and we shared our different experiences as Cameroonians. I think that they should listen because they're going to learn that it's okay. Number one, it's okay to grieve. They're going to learn that there are different kinds of grief. I also learned today there are different kinds of grief. There are different stages. There are different kinds of grief, and it's okay. Even you're African, that you're not feeling abnormally. You're not feeling this the normal way that you think that you should be feeling. And that is okay. And they should listen to this to get educated about that. That's a lot of things that first of all, grief, I feel like it's a topic that is taboo. People don't talk about it. They're so scared to think about death. But I always say death is the sure thing, one thing that will happen. So
Very.
Thank you.